We're joined by Bob in his new bins.
You like these, eh?
How are you doing, Bob?
A bit of a man cold, but I'm not expecting a lot of sympathy. I'm not getting any at home, so why should I get any online?
Yeah, what have you got, Bob? Just flu?
Yeah, I think it's a flu. My wife's been off sick all week. She came down with it last week, and so yeah, I think it's just the flu. I mean, what can you do, right? It's the time of year, so just drink fluids, lounge about, try to get over it, keep buggering on. What can you do?
What's temperature over there, Bob?
It's really disappointing. I thought we were coming in for spring. I brought my golf clubs up from the basement and all. And then we had snow come back and it was minus 18 overnight. So
See,
that's a yeah, it's a bit disappointing. I thought we were done with it. I've taken the snow blower off the tractor and everything. I thought, yeah, spring is going to be here and we're off and running. But
it's the bears
Mother
near
Nature,
where you live, Bob.
what's that?
It's the bears, grizzly bears near where you live.
Yeah, we have brown bears and grizzlies and moose and elk, coyotes and cougar, together with deer and whatnot.
Do the
Yeah.
bears kill people?
Yes, they do. Most people are actually killed by black bears, but grizzly bears are the apex predator. But black bears are actually the ones that tend to track people and kill people. We're very fortunate here. We see a lot of bears on our property. We give them a wide berth, and they don't really bother us. But during bear season, we always carry bear spray with us anyhow.
Somebody left a comment when we mentioned this other week saying bear spray won't do nothing.
Well, bear spray will do a lot more than actually carrying a handgun. You've got to rely upon the fact that you can hit the bear, which is harder said than done if a bear is charging at you. Bear spray will work if it's deployed properly.
So if you shoot them with gun, they just still keep coming for you.
Yeah, I mean, the chances of you getting off a shot and hitting the bear in a vital part of the bear's, physiognomy would be more luck than anything else. And it's unlikely that almost any wild animal is immediately going to stop if hit. Like if you go hunting, for example, you can shoot a deer and the deer's going to run for a while. Well, a bear full of adrenaline charging towards you, it's not going to be like the movies where it's going to go, oh, I'm shot. Uh, it's going to continue to do what it's doing. It might die afterwards. But that even presupposes you could hit the bear. I mean, your heart rate's going to be jacked at, 130, 140 if a bear's coming towards you, and your hand's going to be shaking like a leaf. So bear spray is actually what I recommend that people carry. Deploy bear spray as the bear is close, the bear will stop.
Right, I'll remember that if I ever come to see you, Bob. Yeah. Can you
Uh,
eat bears? Do people, like they eat crocodile in Florida,
oh
don't
yeah,
they? Alligator.
yeah, people hunt spring bear, and bear can be turned into sausage. And I mean, I personally don't hunt, but people do hunt spring bear, and bear sausage is actually quite nice. Bears are often kind of wormy, though, so you end up with meat that's a lot of meat that is not really usable. Like I say, I don't hunt anymore. I used to hunt, but we see the bears. The bears are actually really neat to watch. They are actually a pretty cool animal, and they're very smart as well.
Yeah, I've seen a program where they were rummaging through people's bins and opening packets of biscuits and all sorts of nonsense. And
Yeah. The big thing is to police up your garbage and not to attract a bear. So that's the key thing is you don't want to be. They say a fed bear is a dead bear, right?
yeah, okay. Uh, well, there's a lot been going on in
But
boxing.
but but hey, Russ, what about the glasses? I
They look
thought
good.
this is the vogue in vogue thing. I mean, if
Yeah.
Mr. Fearon wears them, surely they're good for us, right?
Yeah, well, those ones that Big Malk's got on are gigantic, aren't they?
Oh, they yeah, they
Big
are
Malk,
enormous.
these giant bins. How are you, Big Malk? I know you're watching. Uh, Bob, I'm going to ask you about it because I know you've just watched it and I've watched it. Crusher Ben. and Eubank on Piers Morgan. What did you think?
All right. Well, yeah, not really sure where to start. I mean, it was an interesting interview, and I would recommend that, if people are interested, they sit through it. There was a few things I thought that Chris Eubank Jr. was very composed, that he kind of controlled the interview. Um, he he takes the view that Conor Benn is a drug cheat and that there's no possible excuse for Conor Benn having substances in his system. He's called him out as a drug cheat, and he said that what he wants to do is to ensure that anybody watching who is even thinking about cheating understands that if you cheat, your reputation is ruined and you will lose everything. He wants to make an example of Conor Benn. And I found that was an interesting thing that he was saying. I found Conor Benn to be a bit of a brat, maybe uh, to be the less interesting of the two people to listen to. I actually found myself agreeing or siding with, I suppose, Conor Benn in when I was listening to them. I thought Piers Morgan did a reasonably good job, but at the end, when he was trying to insist on insist that Chris Eubank shook Conor Benn's hand, I thought he was carrying on too much. Eubank had made it clear he wasn't interested in doing that, and he should have let it go.
Yeah. Do you feel, Bob, that looking at it how I've looked at it, do you feel that the line of questioning, Crusher, they're setting him up as villain, because he's failed the dope tests, and Eubank's like the good guy? Because normally for years, Eubank's played the villain, hasn't he? Now he's like the good guy, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, traditionally, Chris Eubank Jr. has been thought of as the bad guy in these sort of narratives. And
Yeah.
clearly now that Conor Benn, who looks the more villainous of the two as well, to be honest, is being portrayed as the bad guy. Now, the question, of course, that is in my head always is how much of what we see being portrayed as a genuine animosity between the two is real, and how much is hype or fake beef between the two. And that's something that obviously I don't know, but I feel as though there is a level of selling the fight involved in this. I'd like to know whether or not there's any reality to this, dispute between the two guys. Because for me, it's kind of hard to understand how these two, wealthy young men from very privileged backgrounds are so aggressive towards each other. I guess the cheating allegation adds some spice to it. Maybe that does make Chris Eubank's feelings real. I honestly don't know, and it's so hard to tell because what is spin and what is fact, one doesn't know these days in boxing.
Yeah, well, I personally, right, I won't put it past them all being mates behind scenes, me. You know what I mean? Because it's only a couple of years ago they were actually mates. You know, he were a welterweight, the other one were a super middle, and he just started his career and all that nonsense. And they were actually half all right. And now all of a sudden it's turned into fake beef, hasn't it? Or intense beef.
Yeah, yeah. It has a sense of it being scripted or it being unrealistic. Like I say, the only thing that we don't know is when Conor Benn was found to have a PED in his system, did that make Chris Eubank genuinely angry and upset and getting on his high horse about it? Um, we don't know because we're not in Chris Eubank's head. But any previous dispute between them, I really found that very hard to accept. I, it's so difficult to parse out what is a real, genuine feeling and what is fake feeling. And I'm sure you saw in this interview with Piers Morgan when they stood up and the security guards were between them. That to me had had a feel about it that wasn't real. It seemed to be that was a scripted moment to attract viewership to Piers Morgan's show, which is clearly a very popular and successful show. But it didn't seem to have a genuine sense of guys who were really pissed off at each other. What was your take when you were watching it?
I felt that Crusher's easily wound up if his dad's
Yeah.
mentioned. And the other one, I think he controlled it. You can see he's the one that did were fetched up in a privileged school probably more than Crusher. He's still got that bit of how he speaks. He's had elocution lessons and he speaks properly, doesn't he? Whereas Crusher thinks he's a bit of a geezer from East End, doesn't he?
Yeah, and yet it's interesting because, of course, during Conor Benn's youth, uh, his family experienced a financial reversal, and Conor Benn never experienced that, but Chris Eubank did. But I take your point. Chris Eubank seems the more in control of himself, more mentally, I'm going to say more mentally strong. It does seem that Conor Benn is the reactive, slightly more hair trigger temper one. But again, it's so difficult to tell. Likewise with the accent. I feel as though that is not Conor Benn's normal way of speaking. That sort of East London, Essex hard man that doesn't gel with with how he was brought up, but more importantly, it doesn't gel with where he was brought up. It seems like he's adopted that as a public persona. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
a
like
method
his old
actor
man.
would.
He's trying to be his old man. He even fights the same style, doesn't he? His old man were all right hand warrior and bobbing down and all that kind of stuff. He's got
Oh
that
yeah.
same style as his old man.
Yeah, and I think that clearly Conor Benn and his father are very close, and Conor Benn undoubtedly sort of idolizes his father right through to the copying of his father's style.
Yeah.
And the only time where there's a sense that Conor Benn is really, pissed is when his father is mentioned. And when Chris Eubank was saying about if Conor Benn's father touched him again, that he wouldn't get his hand back. That was the only time that it seemed that there was a sense of reality. Maybe I'm being skeptical, of course, right? Maybe these two guys really do hate each other, but I find it hard to accept, especially today in boxing, where I mean we have all these sorts of narratives being built. I mean, it seems now that we can't get a major fight underway without there being some curry sauce put over on top of the chips to give it a bit more flavor, some more spice by these beefs between people. And if it's not between the fighters, it's between their dads or their dads and a journalist or whatever permutation we're talking of, right?
Yeah, I just think that Chris Eubank handled the interview a little bit better than the other kid, Crusher. What do you
Oh
think,
yes.
Bob?
Yeah, I mean, Chris. I mean, I said at the outset that Chris Eubank seemed to be much more in charge of the interview. Um, I mean, like I say, he seems the more composed. He seems the more mentally strong. He is the older fellow, so he's got some more experience under his belt. Life experience. I mean, he's simply been on the planet longer, and he seems a uh, more chilled, I suppose we would say, the more chilled of the two. Conor Benn, it reminds me of a can of soda that you shake up and pull the top, and it's going to bubble over. Whereas Chris Eubank is more like your bottle of water. You can shake it, and it doesn't bubble up. You can just unscrew the cap, right? But yeah, it was interesting. I did draw. I've now, I think, if it's real, so that's a big thing. If it's real, I think I've actually understood exactly what Chris Eubank is pissed about with respect to the drugs issue. So,
Yeah, I agree. Do you feel, Bob, that he tried to wind Ben up so that when they fight, Ben comes. Obviously, there's going to be more press conferences and face-offs and the weigh-in, but you think he's trying to get Ben in a position where he's just going to come steaming out at him like Nigel did against his dad in the first fight?
yeah, I mean, I think that unless if it's real, if it's not all fake for marketing, let's just assume that it is real. The guy who allows it to get in their head is going to be the guy at a disadvantage. And if it is real, Conor Benn is much more likely to be wound up and to come out guns blazing without much thinking of strategy. And if he does that, I think it's going to be a very hard night for him. And I would anticipate Chris Eubank being able to deal with him inside the distance. The and I believe that Conor Benn will be more easily wound up. I think it'd be very hard for Conor Benn to wind up Chris Eubank Jr. and get Chris Eubank Jr. to be, to lose his composure, to lose his emotions.
Personally, right, looking at it from outside, I just think he flogs Ben. I just think he flogs him. Ben will come out all guns blazing for the first couple of rounds, and I just think he just get settled behind that jab and just pick him off and walk him when he wants to, tie him up, and just press his head down on his neck. And I just think he'll be able to do what he wants, me. That's what I personally think. We have weight
Yeah.
divisions for a reason, Bob.
Yeah, I mean, Eubank is the naturally bigger man. The rehydration clause, I think their contract specifies £10. I know the IBF rules
Changed
are
it to
now
12, haven't they now?
they've moved it to 12, but I don't know if the terms of the contract are limiting it to 10.
Yeah, oh
Um,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and then the weigh-in the following morning is before 10 a.m. So I don't know exactly what time the fight is scheduled for. Let's say it's 8 p.m. or 10 p.m. So from the second weigh-in, Eubank will have another 10 or 12 hours in which to, drink as much water as he needs, to eat more food. So uh, I would anticipate that on the night, Eubank is going to be fighting at a weight that's comfortable to him. I think that the rehydration clause is not going to be so problematical as some people have been suggesting, given that the second weigh-in it has to occur before 10 a.m.
Well, when the Cobra used to fight for IBF, right, they'd only put £5 on from the actual day, the first weighing. So all this about they were letting him put £10 or £12. I don't think it's a big issue. I think it's done for hype, personally. To appease Ben and sell the fight. But I don't think it's a problem. Ben's not fought at welterweight for 3 years, Bob. Now people keep
Yeah.
forgetting that. He's 3 years since his last welterweight fight, 2022 April. He fights next month, 2025 April. So he's not a 147 guy anymore. In that period of 3 years, he's had two fights at 154. This is a
Yeah.
fight at 160. So technically, he's stepping up one weight. Now, Eddie Hills keeps going on about Eubank's really a super middle. He's not fought at super middle for 5.5 years. So he's a middle. Crusher's been a 3 year light middle, so he's a light middle against the middle. If it were Liam Smith fighting Canelo at 160 or whoever at 160, nobody battered an eyelid. Nobody would batter
Oh
an
no,
eyelid, would they? So,
no,
or a Dammers at 160, nobody'd say a word. So why are they all saying that Ben's, oh, he's very brave and we need rehydrations and all this nonsense? There isn't even a world title on the line, Bob. So why are they talking rehydration?
yeah. I mean, they've obviously contracted for this, but like if we do the math, you've got to weigh in at 160, then the following morning Eubank would be allowed to weigh in at either 170 or 172, depending on whether it's 10 or 12 pounds. And then he's got 8 or 10 hours, depending upon what time fight time is, to gain from there. So if we were to weigh Eubank stark bollock naked before he has his hands wrapped, he could well be 175 or 176, right? I mean, that's, I mean that's he could well be a light heavyweight in the dressing room before he's getting his hands wrapped. So I'm not overly concerned with any of these stipulations about the rehydration clause. What weight do you think Eubank walks around in?
Well,
Does he
Eubank
walk
walks
around?
around, I've been told, at 185 is walk around weight. So
Okay,
technically he's taking off 1 stone 11, before every fight to fight at middleweight. And then he'd probably put back on a stone. Do you know what I mean? Maybe a
yeah,
touch more. Canelo used to put £20 to £22 on, didn't he?
yeah.
So you say
So
Eubank walks around 185, 183.
yeah, and on the night of the fight, stepping into the ring, he could easily be 175 quite
Easily,
legally.
easily, very easily, Bob, very easily.
Yeah, so really that's just he's it's fighting weight versus walk around street
But Ben
weight.
was saying he were walking around 176, wasn't he, a month ago? I'm 176. So if he walks around at that, Ben might get it ring about 172, 173. So on the night, they're going to be similar weight, but one's a little bit taller and he's naturally been fighting at a bigger weight all his career. But like I said, he's a 3 year light middle and he's a five and a
Yeah.
half year middle. So we're not talking astronomical weights here. Don't forget, Sugar Ray Robinson was stepping up from 147 to 160 back in the day.
Yeah. And
You know what I
remember
mean? There were no light middle then, Bob.
Sugar Ray Robinson also fought Joey Maxim,
A
who was the
light
light
heavy.
heavyweight champion of the world,
And nearly
right?
won,
I
didn't he?
mean, yeah, when we had 8 weight divisions, you had people often coming in, with a 10 or 12 pound weight difference between the two. I mean, we've got what is it, 17 or 18 weight divisions now, so we've very finely parsed it. I'm not seeing any issue with this. I read all the stuff about how Conor Benn is stepping up and how Eubank is so brave. But yeah, okay. This guy doesn't buy those stories.
Exactly. And that's what Jerry said to me last time on. And I'm not buying it as well.
No, it's again part of the building of a narrative, and we're seeing too much of this in boxing.
What, talking
If
about weight when really he's stepping up one weight? They're talking about it like Eubank's this big Godzilla killer, like Gennady Golovkin, and Ben's like Bambi, aren't they?
well, the same people who are making this huge fuss were not saying anything when Usyk went into the ring against Fury, giving up 55 pounds, which is 4 stone.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. Bob, I've been thinking about a new nickname for you, Bob. You know what it could be instead of Canada Bob? Big Bins Bob.
I can always change them into smaller bins. I mean, I'm not sure about that nickname.
Where's your other
Um,
ones, Bob?
oh, I've got them all around here. I have about 12 pairs of reading glasses around here. These are for the computer, so I can see my notes and I can look at the screen without either being blurry. But they're all relatively inexpensive glasses. I have them everywhere, in both bathrooms, in bedrooms, everywhere. I'm
Go on,
blind
Bob.
as a bat without these glasses. I can see at a distance. If you were 20 meters away, I can see very clearly. But up close, I'm
Well,
I'm
my
I'm I'm
computer glasses are no good after about 15 inch, are they? They're just everything else is blurred, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So
But now
these
that
aren't
you've
overly.
sorry, now that you're a YouTuber, I've got the same problem, Bob. Now that you're a YouTuber, you have to have some for close work on a computer, don't you, to protect your eyes?
Yeah. I mean, I still find it hard to think of myself as a YouTuber,
Why
as a
are you
retired
going
guy.
for it, Bob? Aren't you? Don't you be saying that? You're in the mix. You've got to be in it to win it. We all had to start somewhere, didn't we? But
Well,
boxing is a small niche. I've got friends who've got YouTube channels. They've got 1 million subs, and
wow.
they take videos of people squeezing zits. Do you know what I mean? But boxing's small niche. I don't know not about zits, but you know what I mean? But
Well,
it is what it is.
yeah, I mean, and you know what? It's been a lot of fun. Like I started, I wasn't actually expecting, really, to be perfectly honest, anybody to be watching or listening, and it's been great. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed, what I'm doing, and talking to the other commission lads, and talking boxing. Like, as a retired guy, to sit and talk boxing with people for a couple of hours a day. I mean, that's as good as it gets, right?
Yeah. Okay. I want to have a quick chat with. We've got 13 minutes left. Right. Uh, the Ali Act, Muhammad Ali Act. I take it you do know what that is, don't you?
Yeah, I did a
Yeah.
short video about it as a little bit of
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
public service announcement so that people, understood what it was
Yeah.
about.
Well, the Muhammad Ali Act it was basically designed because people like Don King for years were ripping fighters off. And
Yeah,
he actually, when Muhammad Ali fought Larry Holmes, Ali was due 8 million. He paid him 7, and he kept 1 million back for himself, King, didn't he? And
yeah,
Ali eventually, when he ploughed through his money, he was sued him for the 1 million, and King settled out of court for 50,000, didn't he? Now they brought the Muhammad Ali Act in, and guys like Tim Witherspoon were being robbed by King. There's other guys who were robbing them years, but it's to show a financial breakdown of where the money goes on the show, innit? Now there's no Muhammad Ali Act for the UFC. Now Dana White obviously controls the UFC. He's now partners with Turkey Al Sheikh, and they're looking to put some big moves into boxing. And Dana's not a big lover of the Muhammad Ali Act. Do you feel that because of his relationship with Donald Trump, who is the only person who can remove that act, isn't it? Do you feel that they'll make the move? Paulie Malignaggi, he believes they will, doesn't he?
yeah. I mean, there's been no over the years, people have argued that the Muhammad Ali Act, which we really must remember, is a United States federal statute, so it only has applicability in the United States. People ought not to get too excited about it outside of the United States, unless fighters have contracted to allow for things to be governed by the Muhammad Ali Act. There's been some talk that you could make certain revisions to it and still retain the protections. I mean, like every statute, as time goes by, parts of it seem to become less relevant. Um, it would require, of course, not just the act of the United States president, but it would require congressional change. So I think we might see a move to have certain provisions removed. Like, for example, there's a provision in the Muhammad Ali Act that would prevent a promoter from having its own belt, for example. So, like, if you and I started off a promotion and we wanted our own belt, and we were governed by the Muhammad Ali Act federally in the United States, we wouldn't be allowed to do that. Um, so you could possibly say, well, that's an old piece of legislation that's no longer specifically relevant. So we could see some little changes. I think the core thing about financial transparency, that's going to be harder to do away with. I mean, I understand that the Republicans control both houses of the United States Congress at the moment, but that's probably not going to last for more than 2 years. So I wouldn't get too excited about this. I understand what I can't pronounce his last name. I understand what Paul is saying, but I wouldn't get too excited about this at this present moment in time.
No, I wouldn't. I just think they're getting Paulie could be getting a bit paranoid, but you don't know, you see, because Dan Rayfield came out and said something yesterday that no way on this earth will Dana White want to work with other promoters. they'll want to just do in-house stuff. And do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's fair to say that all of these promoter type fellows, including Dana White, have absolutely monstrous egos, which will
Yeah,
make it inherently difficult for them to want to play nicely in the sandbox with others.
yeah,
And so it might well be the case that Dana White doesn't instinctually want to work nicely and play nicely with others. But at the end of the day, I think we have to recognize that Dana White is a smart business person, and the TKO fellow Nick, I can't remember his last name, Nick Khan, I think.
yeah,
He's
obviously.
also a smart business person. And so the question is there are there business smarts going to rule the day, or are there sort of macho egos going to rule the day? I certainly understand that Dana has a history. I can't say as I'm a fan of his, and he's got a monstrous ego. But I think the ego issue is I think it would be very hard to be a boxing promoter without having that ego, if you know what I mean.
Well, I personally think, right, that I think they're going to struggle, me, coming into boxing if they think they can dominate because you're dealing, if you have to work with everybody in boxing, you're dealing with that many egos, managers, advisors, legal people, consultants, trainers, put spoken, ex-managers, ex-promoters, legal issues. And if he can't have it like he's got it in the UFC, he's going to be pulling what's left of his hair on his head and he ain't got that much. Do you see where I'm coming
Yeah,
from?
and there's a whole strata of matchmakers who are going to be required to be brought on board, and those are, a different breed of individuals as well. I don't know if you saw. I think you must have seen Lou DiBella talking yesterday on the Ariel Helwani show, and he went over some of these things in some detail, which was quite an interesting interview to listen to.
Yep, yep, I agree. Chris Rose put something out. This was a month ago. Boxing was in a dark place throughout the late 80s and 90s. And it was thanks to two promoters who follow the same nasty etiquette, Frank Warren and Don King. Their way of making money were, in King's case, hidden clauses, and any boxer who challenged him, King would sue or get blackballed. Warren's way, pay them little, don't give a fuck about their health, as shown with Terry Marsh. If they don't honour their contract or use their freedom of opinion, I sue them. Terry Marsh was told by doctors he had to retire as he had epilepsy caused by boxing. Instead of Warren being sympathetic like any other decent human being would be, he's he sued March for breach of contract for not fighting. If March did it, I can understand why he did it, yet I don't think it was March. Warren had upset so many people that he was a real life who shot Mr. Burns. That's by Chris Rowe a month ago. What do you think to that? I think he's
Well,
referring to, he's saying he don't think Terry Marsh shot Frank Warren. It was because of how Frank Warren did business back then. But Terry Marsh was obviously acquitted. And obviously Warren and Marsh have gone back and forward. He said, she said, blah, blah, blah. And people have sued Warren. He sued Warren. But what do you think about that the old Don King bricktop era, 80s and 90s?
well, I think the most shocking thing that I can think of is that Don King was given a lifetime achievement award by the Ring magazine. That's possibly the greatest insult
Well,
to.
he's been to every house. He's been to every president's. He's been to White House every year, hasn't he? Or every president's welcomed him, hasn't he?
Yeah, I mean that's if one knows anything about the history of Don King, it's hard to find a less appealing character throughout the history of boxing. And it is somewhat shocking to think that Don King was awarded a Lifetime Achievement Award by Ring Magazine in 2025 or 2024, whenever he got the award. Like he got it recently. With respect to Frank Warren, the only thing we really can say with any degree of certainty about Frank Warren is he's very litigious. He likes to use the power of the courts, or at least the threat of the power of the courts, to get his own way. And again, when one looks at people who are litigious like that, I think there's a fair and legitimate question to ask about why is somebody so litigious. Many people are very successful in business with rarely having the need to go to court, where Frank Warren seems to think of that as a default position, which, to my mind, is somewhat questionable.
Well, his first job when he left school, Bricktops, he worked in a lawyer's office, didn't he?
Apparently, he was. I don't know if he was an article student or whether he had a clerical admin type job in a solicitor's office.
Yeah,
But I
clerical
believe,
admin job, wasn't it?
yeah, I believe that he has spent some time in a solicitor's office, and that probably gave him an interest in how civil proceedings work, and
Yeah.
he's undoubtedly used that.
He's litigation crazy. I wish he'd come and take me on. When it went, he's suing Eubank, innit? Oh, I wish he'd sue me because it's all online. He wouldn't have a prayer if Eubank did his own work. I've already spoke to a legal person about it. She said I'd represent Eubank.
Well,
It'll probably be a slam dunk.
from what little I know about the Eubank situation, it doesn't seem to be overly difficult for Eubank to engage counsel who would be able to show to Frank Warren's counsel that, you know what, there's truth or justification in what Eubank said, because that, of course, as you know, is a defense. In the tort of defamation, truth or justification is a defense. So, if somebody says, hey, you're a fat man and you want to sue because you think that's defamatory, and then somebody produces a picture of a person who's 400 pounds and says, well, it's fat, it is what it is, right?
Well, it's like
So,
it's just like him. It's just like the judges summing up when he lost the court case against Joe Calzaghe. That's online if people need to look. Or Curtis Woodhouse, he's got
yeah,
framed checks that were bounced, and that's
yeah,
all he said. It was scumbag behaviour. That's all.
yeah,
And been
yeah.
robbing
So,
fighters years. Well, there you go. He didn't pay Calzaghe, did he? And Curtis Woodhouse were bouncing checks. So I wish he'd come and sue me. Do you know what I mean? I
well,
wish he'd come and take me on.
you never know. He might, in
I
which
hope he
case,
does. I hope he
in
does.
which
He'll get
case
me
you might
loads of views.
you might get a judicial decision in favor, and maybe you'll get a windfall. Maybe you'll get an
Yeah,
extra little bit of,
be nice,
you know,
won't it? Be nice. But
a little,
I think
a
he's
little bit
got a
of
few
bounce.
more. I think he's got a few more problems than me at the moment. Especially with Turkey and them and Dana forming. But listen, Bob, it's been a pleasure having you on. You're always a gentleman. I hope you get better.
Oh, I'm
It's
sure I will.
not nice having flu and being a bit under. And obviously, you're living in -18 conditions, aren't you?
Yes, and it's getting time to go out and feed the horses, so they
All
won't feed
right then.
themselves, unfortunately.
All right then, Bob. Well,
But
listen, you have a
thanks for
great
having me
day.
on.
No problem. You
Thanks for
take
having
care,
me
Bob.
on.
All the
Cheers.
best.
Thank you,
Bye.
Ross.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Well, that were Bob from Canada. Women love him, men want to be him. Let's hope he gets some tunes or lockets down him and he cures his flu. I used to put Vicks on my chest when I was a kid. So, all right, all right. Wait, thanks for liking and subscribing and leaving a comment. Booyaka. Max, don't even text me, Max, until you're a cruiserweight. That means I'll probably never ever get a text ever from you, Max. Pop, pop, bang.